Every morning, as the sun began to rise over Maplewood, Sam Carter would step out of his small apartment with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a stack of letters tucked under his arm. For nearly 10 years, he had walked the same route through the quiet suburban neighborhood delivering mail to its residents. It was a simple life, but Sam took pride in it. He knew everyone by name: the elderly couple who always left cookies on their porch, the young mother juggling 2 toddlers while watering her garden, and even Mr. Peterson, who grumbled about junk mail but secretly loved chatting about the weather. But that particular autumn morning felt different. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of fallen leaves, yet something heavy lingered in the atmosphere. As Sam approached Mrs. Evelyn Harper's house, a quaint little cottage with flower boxes hanging from the windows, he noticed she wasn't inside like she usually was. Instead, she stood just outside her front door, clutching a small brown package wrapped tightly with twine. Her posture seemed stiff, almost unnatural, and her eyes darted nervously around the street. Sam slowed his pace, confused. Mrs. Harper was always pleasant, often greeting him with a warm smile and sometimes even offering him homemade lemonade during the summer months. But today there was no smile. She looked pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held the package close to her chest. When Sam finally reached her gate, he greeted her cheerfully, trying to break the tension. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper. Beautiful day, isn't it?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced behind her as if checking whether someone might be watching. Then, without saying a word, she stepped forward and thrust the package into Sam's hands. Startled, he instinctively took it, feeling its weight. It wasn't heavy, but the way she handed it to him made it feel like it carried more than just physical mass. "Is everything okay?" Sam asked, concern creeping into his voice. He tilted his head, studying her face. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. Whatever this was, it clearly troubled her. Mrs. Harper hesitated, for a moment longer before nodding stiffly. "Yes," she said quickly, though her tone lacked conviction. Without another word, she turned on her heel and hurried back inside, closing the door firmly behind her. Sam stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door, then down at the package in his hands. It was neatly wrapped, almost too perfectly, with thin strands of twine crisscrossing each other. There was no return address, no recipient name, only the word urgent scribbled across the top in bold, uneven handwriting. Something about it sent a shiver down his spine, though he couldn't quite explain why. As he resumed his route, the package felt heavier with every step. His mind raced with questions. What could possibly be inside? Why had Mrs. Harper acted so strangely? And most importantly, why did she give it to him? Despite his curiosity and the growing unease bubbling in his stomach, Sam forced himself to focus on his job, slipping letters into mailboxes and waving to familiar faces along the way. But deep down, he knew this ordinary morning had taken an unexpected turn, and nothing about his day would ever feel normal again. Sam couldn't stop thinking about the package as he continued his route. It sat tucked under his arm, its presence almost suffocating. Every step he took felt heavier than the last, and the cheerful greetings he exchanged with neighbors came out more mechanical than usual. His mind kept replaying the scene with Mrs. Harper, the way her hands shook, how she avoided meeting his eyes, and that hurried retreat into her house. Something wasn't right, and Sam knew it. By the time he reached the end of his route, the package had become an obsession. Back at the post office, where mail carriers sorted their deliveries for the next day, Sam hesitated before placing it on the counter. Normally, undeliverable packages were sent back to the sorting center or returned to the sender if there was no clear address. But this one didn't have a return label or any identifying information at all. Just the word urgent glaring up at him like a warning sign. His co-worker, Lisa, noticed his distraction immediately. She leaned over, her brow furrowed. "You okay, Sam? You've been acting weird since you got back." Her voice was light, teasing, but her sharp gaze told him she wasn't fooled. "Yeah, I'm fine," Sam lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Lisa raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she gestured toward the package. "What's that? Another mystery delivery?" Sam shrugged, trying to play it cool. Not sure. Someone dropped it off with Mrs. Harper, and she gave it to me. No name, no address, just this. He pointed to the word urgent, hoping it would sound casual enough to brush off her curiosity. But Lisa wasn't buying it. She crossed her arms and tilted her head. That's odd. Did she say anything about it? Sam hesitated, unsure how much to share. Finally, he muttered, Not really. She seemed, nervous, though. Lisa frowned, glancing at the package again. Nervous? Like, scared nervous? Sam nodded slowly, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. The more he talked about it, the weirder it sounded, even to himself. Why would someone leave a mysterious package with an elderly woman who barely left her house? And why did she look so terrified when handing it over? Unable to shake the nagging feeling, Sam decided to take matters into his own hands. After Lisa went back to sorting letters, he found a quiet corner of the post office and carefully examined the package again. The twine was tied tightly, almost too perfectly, as if whoever wrapped it wanted to ensure it wouldn't come undone. Accidentally. The brown paper was smooth, free of creases or markings except for that single word scrawled across the top. Against his better judgment, and despite knowing it broke protocol, he began loosening the twine. His heart pounded as he peeled back the layers of paper, revealing a plain white envelope inside. Gingerly, he opened it and pulled out a folded note. Unfolding it, his breath caught in his throat. 6 chilling words stared back at him. They know what you've done. For a moment, Sam froze, the room spinning around him. What did it mean? Who were they? And what exactly had he supposedly done? His mind raced through countless possibilities, each worse than the last. Was this some kind of prank? A cruel joke by someone who knew him? Or was it something far more sinister? Before he could process the note fully, footsteps echoed behind him. Startled, Sam quickly stuffed the paper back into the envelope and shoved it into his bag. Turning around, he saw Lisa approaching, holding a stack of letters. You still messing with that thing? She asked, nodding toward the package. Sam forced another weak smile. Nah, just trying to figure out where it goes. Well, good. Luck with that, she said with a chuckle before walking away. As soon as she was gone, Sam exhaled sharply, his hands trembling. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost time to leave. Grabbing his bag, he slipped the envelope inside and headed for the door. Whatever this was, he needed answers. But deep down, he feared the truth might be something he wasn't ready to face. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. The note haunted him, its 6 words replaying in his mind like a broken record. They know what you've done. It wasn't just the message itself that unsettled him. It was the tone, the implication that someone out there had discovered something about his past. But what could it possibly refer to? He wasn't a criminal. He lived a quiet, ordinary life. At least that's what he told himself as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, exhaustion clung to him like a heavy coat. Still, he dragged himself out of bed and went through the motions of his routine. As he sipped his coffee, his eyes kept darting to the envelope sitting on his kitchen table. He hadn't opened it again after leaving the post office, but its presence loomed over him. Finally, unable to ignore it any longer, he picked it up and examined it closely under the light. There was nothing unusual about it, just plain white paper, slightly worn at the edges. No fingerprints stood out, no hidden clues. Just those 6 damning words. Sam's thoughts spiraled. Who could they be? And what exactly did they think he'd done? He tried convincing himself it was some kind of prank, a cruel joke by someone who knew him casually or even a former co-worker messing with his head. But deep down, he knew better. The note felt personal, deliberate. Whoever wrote it wanted him to feel afraid, and it was working. Desperate for answers, Sam decided to retrace his steps from the previous day. Maybe Mrs. Harper knew more than she let on. She had acted so strangely when handing him the package. Surely she must have some idea where it came from. With renewed determination, he grabbed his jacket and headed to her house. When he arrived, the curtains were drawn, and the front door was locked. Knocking produced no response. Frustrated, Sam walked around the side of the house, peering through windows. Inside, the living room looked untouched. Neatly arranged furniture, a vase of fresh flowers on the coffee table. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet there was an eerie stillness about the house, as if it were holding its breath. Feeling uneasy, Sam returned to his car and sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel tightly. If Mrs. Harper wasn't going to give him answers, maybe someone else could. He thought back to the people he'd delivered mail to over the years. The friendly faces, the chatty neighbors, the ones who always seemed to know everyone's business. Perhaps one of them had seen something odd recently. But as he drove through Maplewood, another thought occurred to him. What if this wasn't about anyone in the neighborhood at all? What if it was about him personally? Memories began surfacing. Things he'd long buried. Moments he'd convinced himself didn't matter anymore. Years ago, during college, he'd been involved in a hit-and-run accident. A pedestrian had been struck late at night near campus, and though Sam hadn't been driving, he'd been too scared to report what he'd witnessed. Back then, fear had paralyzed him, and guilt had eaten away at him until he forced himself to forget. Could this be connected? Had someone finally traced it back to him? The possibility made his chest tighten. He parked his car on the side of the road and leaned forward, resting his forehead against the wheel. For years he'd told himself that staying silent wasn't the same as doing wrong. But now, faced with this cryptic note, he wondered if silence was its own kind of crime. As dusk settled over Maplewood, Sam realized he couldn't keep running from whatever, or whoever, was behind this. Whether it was a prank, a misunderstanding, or something far darker, he needed to confront it head-on. Taking a deep breath, he started the engine and headed home. Tomorrow, he vowed, he would dig deeper into his past and face whatever truths awaited him. The next morning, Sam woke up with a sense of dread hanging over him like a storm cloud. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life was unraveling, piece by piece. The note's words, "They know what you've done," echoed, louder in his mind than ever before. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It felt like invisible eyes were watching him, waiting for him to make a move. Determined to get answers, he decided to dig deeper into his past, starting with the one thing he'd tried so hard to forget, the hit-and-run accident from college. Sitting at his cluttered kitchen table, Sam opened his laptop and began searching online for any information about the case. It didn't take long to find archived news articles from nearly 15 years ago. The headlines were grim. Pedestrian struck in hit-and-run near campus. Victim still unidentified after weeks. Police appeal for witnesses. Each article painted a picture of confusion and frustration, a mystery that had never been solved. As he scrolled through the details, Sam's stomach churned. The victim had been found unconscious on the side of the road, critically injured. Despite extensive searches, no one could identify them, and the driver of the car was never caught. At the time, Sam had convinced himself that reporting what he knew wouldn't change anything. After all, he hadn't been driving. He'd only seen the car speeding away moments after hearing the crash. But now, staring at those old articles, he realized how much weight his silence carried. If he'd spoken up back then, maybe the truth would have come out sooner. His investigation led him to discover something even more unsettling. One article mentioned that the victim's family had hired a private investigator when the police failed to solve the case. Sam's heart raced as he searched for updates on the investigation, but found nothing recent. Had the family given up, or worse, had they traced the car involved back to someone close to him? That's when it hit him. The car. Sam remembered vividly whose car it was. During college, he worked part-time at his father's dealership, helping clean and maintain vehicles. Late one night, he'd noticed one of their cars missing from the lot. When it returned later, dented and scratched, Sam had overheard whispers among the staff about covering it up. No one reported it, not to the police, not to anyone. And Sam, too scared to speak up, stayed silent. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Someone must have connected the dots. Maybe the private investigator had uncovered records linking the damaged car to his father's dealership. Or perhaps someone who worked there back then had talked. Either way, it was clear now. Whoever sent the package knew exactly who he was, and they weren't going to let him off the hook. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Anonymous letters began arriving at his doorstep, each one more menacing than the last. One contained a grainy photograph of him walking his route, circled in red ink. Another included clippings from the old news articles about the hit and run, along with a handwritten note that read, "Your secrets don't stay buried forever." Every time Sam stepped outside, he felt like he was being watched. Cars lingered near his house, their engines idling for minutes before driving away. Footsteps echoed behind him on quiet streets, fading whenever he turned around. Even his phone buzzed late at night with calls from unknown numbers. When he answered, all he heard was heavy breathing and a chilling whisper, "You can't run forever." Paranoia consumed him. He stopped answering texts from friends and avoided Lisa at work, afraid she might notice how jumpy he'd become. Sleep became impossible, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Was this some kind of revenge plot? Were they planning to expose him publicly? Or was this just the beginning of something far worse? One evening, sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, Sam stared at the pile of threatening notes spread across his table. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to truly face the guilt he'd buried. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. Running from the past wasn't an option anymore. Sam knew he couldn't face this nightmare alone anymore. If someone was targeting him, he needed answers, and Mrs. Harper was the only lead he had. She might not have sent the package herself, but she clearly knew more than she'd let on when she handed it to him. Determined to confront her, Sam drove back to her house early the next morning, hoping to catch her before she disappeared behind closed doors again. When he arrived, the house looked eerily quiet, just as it had the other day. The curtains were still drawn, and there was no sign of movement inside. Taking a deep breath, Sam knocked firmly on the door. After a long moment, he heard shuffling footsteps, and then the door cracked open slightly. Mrs. Harper peered out, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes widened when she saw him standing there. "Mrs. Harper," Sam began, keeping his voice calm but firm, "I need to talk to you about the package you gave me." She hesitated, gripping the edge of the door tightly. "I don't know anything," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Please, just leave me out of this." Sam stepped closer, his frustration bubbling over. "You can't do that. Someone left it with you for a reason. Who gave it to you? What did they say?" Mrs. Harper glanced nervously over her shoulder, as if afraid someone might be listening. For a moment, Sam thought she wouldn't answer. But then, with a heavy sigh, she opened the door a little wider and stepped onto the porch, closing it securely behind her. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she spoke. "A man came to my house late at night," she admitted, wringing her hands. "He slipped the package under my door and told me I had to give it to you the next morning. He said bad things would happen if I didn't." Sam's stomach sank. "Did you see his face? Did he tell you anything else?" She shook her head. "He wore a hood and he kept his voice low. I didn't recognize him, but..." She trailed off, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Sam. I didn't want any part of this. I've been so scared ever since." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't random. It was calculated. Whoever was behind this had chosen Mrs. Harper because they knew she wouldn't question their instructions. They'd used her fear to ensure the package reached him, and now she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than either of them. As Sam thanked her and turned to leave, he noticed something strange. A black SUV parked halfway down the street, its engine idling. The windows were tinted, making it impossible to see inside, but the vehicle stood out in the otherwise peaceful neighborhood. It hadn't been there when he arrived, and something about it felt wrong. Sam slowed, his pace pretending to adjust his bag as he walked past. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the driver's side window lower slightly, revealing the faint outline of a figure watching him. His pulse quickened, and he forced himself to keep moving, resisting the urge to look directly at the car. When he reached his own vehicle, he climbed in quickly, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the keys. Glancing in his rearview mirror, he saw the SUV pull away from the curb and drive off in the opposite direction. Whoever was inside hadn't followed him. Not yet, anyway. But their presence lingered in his mind like a shadow. Back at home, Sam sat at his kitchen table, staring blankly at the threatening notes scattered across it. Mrs. Harper's confession had confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't just about guilt or revenge. Someone was orchestrating this entire thing, feeding him clues bit by bit to keep him guessing and terrified. And while he still didn't know exactly who they were, one thing was clear. They weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. For the first time, Sam allowed himself to consider the possibility that he might not be able to handle this alone. But who could he trust? Everyone around him seemed too far removed from the truth, or worse, dangerously close to danger themselves. As night fell and silence enveloped his apartment, Sam realized he was running out of options. Whatever happened next, he would have to face it head on and hope he survived the fallout. As the days passed, Sam's paranoia grew into a suffocating weight that followed him everywhere. The black SUV reappeared sporadically, always lingering at a distance, on his mail route, outside his apartment, even near the post office where he worked. It never got too close, but its presence was unmistakable, a constant reminder that he was being watched. Each sighting sent a fresh wave of panic coursing through him, and he found himself jumping at every sound, scrutinizing every stranger who crossed his path. The anonymous letters kept coming, each one more menacing than the last. One arrived with a map circled in red ink, marking locations Sam frequented: his apartment, the post office, Mrs. Harper's house. Another contained a single sentence typed in bold capital letters: "We're closer than you think." The messages weren't just threats, they were taunts designed to break him down piece by piece. Whoever was behind this wasn't in a hurry. They were savoring his unraveling. Sam tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it became impossible. He started skipping work, claiming illness when pressed for details. His co-workers, including Lisa, grew suspicious of his erratic behavior. At first, she texted him daily, asking if he was okay. When he ignored her messages, she showed up at his door with soup and concern. But Sam turned her away, too afraid to let anyone get close. What if they decided to hurt someone else because of him? Isolation consumed him. Days blurred together as he stayed holed up in his apartment, curtains drawn tight against prying eyes. He stopped answering calls entirely, unplugged his landline, and disabled notifications on his phone. Even grocery trips became a calculated risk, timed late at night when the streets were empty. Every creak of the floorboards or rustle outside his window made his heart race. Sleep was out of the question. Exhaustion gnawed at him, but fear kept him awake. One evening, while pacing his living room, Sam noticed something strange about the threatening notes. They all had one thing in common: a faint watermark barely visible unless held up to the light. Squinting, he examined each letter carefully, realizing the pattern resembled a logo. A magnifying glass confirmed his suspicion. It was the insignia of a private investigation firm based in the city. His hands trembled as he searched online for the company. Their website was sleek and professional, boasting decades of experience solving cold cases. Scrolling through their list of past investigations, Sam's blood ran cold. One case stood out, a section dedicated to unsolved hit-and-run accidents, featuring a photo of the very street where the accident from his college days had occurred. Beneath it was a brief description: "Justice for victims and families. Denied closure." It didn't take long to connect the dots. This wasn't random harassment, it was personal. Someone connected to the victim's family had hired the investigators to dig deeper into the case. And now, they'd traced the trail back to him. Desperation clawed at Sam. He needed help, but who could he trust? Turning himself in felt like the only option, yet the thought terrified him. Would confessing bring relief, or unleash consequences he couldn't handle? He spent hours debating, his mind spinning in endless circles, until exhaustion finally overtook him. When dawn broke, Sam made a decision. He couldn't keep running. Grabbing his coat, he stepped outside, bracing himself for whatever came next. As he locked his front door, he glanced down the street and froze. The black SUV was parked there again, its engine silent but its headlights glowing faintly in the gray morning light. For a moment, neither moved. Then slowly, the driver's window lowered, revealing a figure watching him intently. Sam swallowed, hard, clutching the keys in his hand like a lifeline. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. The game was no longer just about guilt or secrets. It was about survival and facing the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The figure in the black SUV didn't move, and neither did Sam. For what felt like an eternity, they simply stared at each other, locked in a silent standoff. The driver's face was partially obscured by shadows, but Sam could feel their eyes, boring into him, unyielding and cold. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the person inside the car could hear it. Finally, after what seemed like hours, but was probably only seconds, the SUV's engine roared to life. Instead of speeding toward him or following him, though, the vehicle pulled away slowly, disappearing around the corner. Sam exhaled sharply, his legs trembling beneath him. He leaned against the railing of his porch, trying to steady himself. Whoever was behind this wasn't ready to confront him directly, yet, but the message was clear. They were watching, waiting, and letting him know they were always one step ahead. Determined not to let fear paralyze him any longer, Sam climbed into his car and drove straight to the private investigation firm he'd discovered online. It was time to face the truth head-on, no matter how painful it might be. When he arrived at their sleek downtown office, he hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The receptionist greeted him with a polite smile, asking how she could assist him. "I need to speak with whoever is handling the case involving the hit and run near Maplewood University," Sam said, his voice shaky but resolute. "It's personal." The receptionist frowned slightly, typing something into her computer. After a pause, she nodded. "Let me see if Mr. Daniels is available. Please have a seat." Minutes later, a tall man in his late 50s emerged from a nearby hallway. His sharp, suit and piercing gaze gave him an air of authority, but there was also a hint of weariness in his expression, a look Sam recognized all too well. "Mr. Carter?" the man asked, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Daniels. I understand you're here about one of our ongoing investigations?" Sam nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I think I know something about the accident you're looking into. Something important." Daniels raised an eyebrow, gesturing for Sam to follow him into a private meeting room. Once seated, Sam recounted everything: the night he saw the car, speeding away, the damage he noticed at his father's dealership, and the whispers among employees about covering it up. He admitted his own silence, his guilt over not reporting what he knew, and how the recent threats had forced him to confront the past he'd tried so hard to bury. Daniels listened intently, taking notes without interrupting. When Sam finished, the investigator leaned back in his chair, studying him carefully. "Do you realize how significant this information is?" Daniels asked quietly. "We've been working on behalf of the victim's family for years, trying to piece together what happened that night. You may have just given us the missing link we needed." Sam nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered. "But I want to make things right, for them, for the victim, and for myself." Daniels placed a reassuring hand on the table. "That takes courage, Mr. Carter. And while your confession won't undo the past, it can help bring closure to those who've waited so long for answers." As Sam left the office, a strange mix of emotions washed over him. Relief battled with dread, hope clashed with regret. He still didn't know what consequences awaited him, legal repercussions, public shame, or worse. But for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of peace. He had finally stopped running from the truth. Driving home, Sam noticed the black SUV parked across the street from his apartment. This time, instead of feeling afraid, he met its gaze head-on. Whoever was inside would soon learn that their leverage over him was gone. Whatever came next, Sam was ready, or as ready as he could ever be. The next morning, Sam woke up with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The weight of carrying his secret was still heavy, but it no longer crushed him like before. He had taken the first step toward making things right, and though he didn't know what the future held, he knew he couldn't turn back now. After showering and dressing, he made himself a cup of coffee and sat at his kitchen table, staring out the window. For once, the sight of the black SUV parked down the street didn't fill him with dread. It reminded him that he was finally facing the storm instead of hiding from it. By mid-morning, Sam drove to the police station. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he pulled into the parking lot, but he forced himself to breathe deeply and focus. Walking through the glass doors felt surreal. He half expected someone to stop him or ask why he was there. Instead, the lobby was quiet, save for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. At the front desk, an officer greeted him warmly. "I need to report something," Sam said, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "It's about an accident that happened over 15 years ago. A hit and run near Maplewood University." The officer nodded, gesturing for him to take a seat while she fetched someone who could assist him further. Minutes later, Detective Harris, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, joined him in a private room. As Sam began recounting his story, the car speeding away, the scratches on its bumper, the whispers at his father's dealership, he felt a strange sense of release, like opening a dam that had been holding back years of guilt. Detective Harris listened intently, jotting down notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Sam finished, the detective leaned forward slightly, studying him closely. "You understand this is going to lead to an investigation, Mr. Carter? You'll likely be called in for further questioning, and we may need to involve other parties connected to the dealership." Sam nodded without hesitation. "I'm prepared for that. I just want to do what's right." Harris offered a small, approving nod. "That takes courage, son. We'll do everything we can to get to the bottom of this." As Sam left the station, he noticed the black SUV was gone. Whether whoever had been watching him realized their leverage was lost or simply decided to wait and see, he didn't know, and honestly, he didn't care. He felt lighter than he had in years, even as he braced himself for the challenges ahead. Over the following weeks, the investigation unfolded. News outlets picked up the story, reigniting public interest in the cold case. Employees from his father's old dealership were questioned, some reluctantly admitting they'd suspected foul play all along. Meanwhile, Sam faced backlash from former acquaintances and co-workers who struggled to reconcile the quiet mailman they knew with the man confessing to complicity in a cover-up, but not everyone turned against him. Lisa reached out after reading about his confession, her voice filled with concern rather than judgment. "I don't pretend to understand everything you're going through," she told him during one tearful phone call, "but I'm proud of you for doing the right thing." In time, the victim's family released a statement thanking Sam for coming forward, acknowledging that his actions, however belated, brought them closer to closure. While forgiveness wasn't guaranteed, knowing he'd helped bring justice gave Sam a measure of peace. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled around his feet, Sam walked past Mrs. Harper's house. She stood on her porch, watching him approach, with a mixture of sadness and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her sweater tightly, "for ending this nightmare." Sam nodded, offering her a faint smile. "We both played our part," he replied softly. "Now it's time to move forward." As he continued down the street, he spotted a figure lingering near the corner. It was the driver of the black SUV, now revealed to be a relative of the victim. They exchanged a long look before the person turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Sam alone with his thoughts. Redemption wasn't easy, and the scars of his choices would always remain. But for the first time in years, Sam walked with purpose, ready to face whatever came next.